In this episode of the Quo-Cast, I would like to share with you some of my favourite singles of Status Quo's from the 2000s. This was a period where the band had been going for a number of decades, and just when it looked like they were about to fade out with the likes of Famous in the Last Century, they came back to life with a bang with the Heavy Traffic album. And yes, the albums during this period in the 2000s were very well received, but they also had some of their highest charting entries for many a year. And I'm going to share with you some of my favourites. This one, Jam Side Down, remember picking this one up. A track that sounded so typically Quo, but was actually from the pen of singer-songwriter Charlie Dyer and the very prolific writer Terry Britten. And it's just so perfectly Quo, isn't it? Because you've got that rhythm in there, and it's Rossi's vocal, and yeah, it just works really well. It obviously appealed to outside of the fan base as well. It was just a really well-crafted pop rock song. When it gets to that section, you are my destiny, you bring out the best in me, you, there's just something that just elevates it, whether it's the harmonies or the production from Mike Paxman, whatever it is, it's just brilliant. And it was all topped off by this really clever video at the time of them performing on the HMS Ark Royal, leaning into that sort of comedic image that they'd spent the 90s kind of honing. And so yes, a really fruitful time that was. The real renewed energy with the addition of Matt Letley as well. This one got to number 17, and it was one of their last performances on Top of the Pops. I mean, that's when you know you've made it, when in that period, you know, when you've got on Top of the Pops amongst all the dance acts and pop acts, and there are Quo once again playing in the mainstream. Amazing. Let's take these chronologically and go with this one, You'll Come Round, which was released in 2004, and it was included in a different mix on their Excess All Areas album. It reached a height in the UK charts of number 14, and I have to say, I remember looking this up on iTunes when that first became a thing, and downloading it and thinking, I'm not sure I like this. There's something of, like, it's got a different edge to it. I'm not quite sure. And then as I kept listening, that chorus, the You'll Come Round When You're Ready, I'll Keep On Nice and Steady, I think it was that was kind of taking it the other way for me, you know, not being in my favourite camp. And then as I kept listening, it's like it was a grower. It just kept going. And of course they performed this on morning television. It was quite a huge hit at that point. You know, for a band of Quo's age to still be getting hits in the 2000s was an incredible thing. But it's down to the songwriting, in this case of Francis Rossi and Bob Young, and the production and the melody. It was just a catchy thing that I'm sure stood out on the radio. And I look forward to hearing the demo of this when it appears on a new Francis Rossi album called The Way We Were Volume 1 very soon. So yeah, this is brilliant. They obviously said we need a single, stuck it on Excess All Areas, hence the badge here with the cover from Excess All Areas on, and there we are. This was sort of as well in the dying ends of the CD single. It was sort of in the late 2000s that properly died out and made way to streaming. This was slightly before streaming became appropriate to the chart. I mean, now it's like streaming and downloads and everything else. So yeah, that is You'll Come Round. So let's move on to the next single, which I think has to be my favourite. It reached a peak of number 11 in the UK charts, and I loved everything about it, whether it was the music video, flying in the plane with Rick on the top of it and Francis in the passenger seat there, whether it was the documentary by John Keeling that documented the recording of this of the album it came from, but this song in particular, whether it was their appearance on Coronation Street, whatever it was, this song sticks out for me at the time and since for a number of personal reasons. The amount of time that this John David penned song, and remember, John David is the guy who wrote for Quo songs like Rollin' Home and Red Sky, and here he is with this one, which is just so uplifting and motivational. It's the party ain't over yet, and certainly for Quo at this point, it wasn't. I mean, a number 11 chart placing with it's a bit more commercial than the rest of the ones in here, because I think at this point there are extra overdubs. I think there's acoustic guitars in there. There's other bits and pieces. You know, it's double tracked in some cases, which is usual, but here it seemed to be a little bit more. But whatever it was, all the pieces came together, and it still sounds good to me, whether in the original album mix or the single version, which is just a little bit punchier for the radio. So that is The Party Ain't Over Yet. Quo are one of those bands where they have an album out and you're excited, and then they disappear for a bit and they go off and do their touring. And for me, I didn't always do the touring. I couldn't afford it, or you know, my parents couldn't take me, or whatever it was. Like I didn't engage with that. So to me, they kind of dropped out of consciousness, even though they were still on my stereo, but I wasn't seeing anything new from them. And then a couple of years later, you know, after The Party Ain't Over Yet, there comes news of not only a new single, The Beginning of the End, but a new album produced by Pip Williams, who did a lot of their late 70s and mid 80s stuff. His last production for them before that being the first covers album, Don't Stop. This single, Beginning of the End, that video on the London Eye was so striking. I mean, it must have cost them a lot of money to do, but it really worked for the song, and the lyrics at the time were quite political, actually. I don't know whether that was the intention. I'd love to ask Francis and co what the meaning behind the lyrics, because you know, happy days are here again, it's official from number 10, one moving in, one moving out, all change on the roundabout. And around that time we had a change of Prime Minister, so whether it was, you know, conscious or not, I wouldn't imagine so, but you know, that's a question for another day. But Pip Williams, it's not that the earlier stuff wasn't like loud and in your face, it's just this seemed to be just a little bit higher, you know, peaking a bit higher, and the guitars much louder in the mix, and it sounded great on my hi-fi at the time. On the album version you get those guitars that kind of go in before the da 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 da, whereas this just goes straight in. And yeah, I loved the concept, I loved the video, and a little bit like The Party Ain't Over Yet, it's just been there for me when I've needed it. So yeah, these are my favourite Status Quo singles of the 2000s. What are yours? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below.